The strongest people do not waste their lives trying to be understood by everyone. They do not enter every argument, defend every decision, or chase every person who questions their value. They understand something most people discover too late. The more desperately you try to prove yourself, the more power you give to the people watching you. When your peace depends on approval, anyone can control you by withholding it. A stranger can change your mood with one comment. A friend can make you doubt yourself by becoming distant. A person who rejected you can occupy your thoughts for months, simply because you want them to recognize what they failed to appreciate. But the moment you stop asking the world for permission to respect yourself, something changes. You become calmer, you become clearer, and for the first time, your life begins to belong to you. Most people do not realize how deeply the need for validation shapes their behavior. They choose careers to impress people they barely know. They stay in relationships because leaving might look like failure. They hide their real opinions to avoid rejection. They post achievements, not because the achievement feels meaningful, but because silence from others feels unbearable. Even kindness can become a search for approval. You help, give, and sacrifice, while secretly hoping someone will finally say that you are good enough. Then, when recognition does not arrive, resentment begins to grow. You tell yourself that people are ungrateful, but the deeper truth is that your generosity came with an invisible request. You were not only giving, you were asking to be seen. There is nothing wrong with wanting appreciation. Human beings are social by nature. Encouragement can strengthen us. Meaningful praise can guide us. And healthy relationships require mutual recognition. The problem begins when appreciation changes from something you enjoy into something you need in order to feel stable. When validation becomes emotional oxygen, you begin to suffocate whenever someone stops supplying it. You no longer ask, "Is this decision right?" You ask, "Will people approve?" You no longer ask, "Does this relationship respect my values?" You ask, "What will it say about me if I leave?" You no longer measure your progress against who you were yesterday. You measure it against the attention received by someone else. This is how a person slowly becomes a prisoner without seeing the walls. The prison is built from imagined judgments. What will they think? What will they say? Will they laugh? Will they understand? Will they recognize my effort? Each question appears harmless, but together they form a cage. You begin editing yourself before anyone has even criticized you. You avoid the difficult path because it may not produce immediate admiration. You remain silent when you should speak, and speak when silence would protect your dignity. You perform confidence while privately feeling empty. You become skilled at managing appearances, but lose contact with your own mind. The Stoics understood that a life controlled by reputation could never be free. Epictetus taught that some things belong to us, while others do not. Our judgments, choices, intentions, and actions belong to us. The opinions of other people do not. Reputation does not. Applause does not. Whether someone understands your motives does not. This distinction sounds simple, but living by it requires discipline. The mind constantly tries to control what was never placed in its hands. It wants to control how others interpret your words, whether they acknowledge your growth, and whether they regret underestimating you. But another person's mind is their territory. When you attempt to govern it, you abandon your own. Imagine two people walking through the same room. One is constantly scanning faces, looking for signs of approval. Did they notice me? Did that person look impressed? Why did nobody respond when I spoke? The second person enters with a clear purpose. He is respectful, aware, and open to feedback. But he is not emotionally begging the room to confirm his identity. The first person may appear confident, yet his inner state changes with every reaction. The second person may be quiet, but he carries something more powerful than performance. He carries self-possession. His attention remains under his command. People who do not need constant validation are not necessarily louder, richer, or more successful. Often, they are simply more internally aligned. Their public behavior and private values are not at war. They know what they believe. They understand why they are pursuing a goal. They have accepted that every meaningful choice will disappoint someone. Because of this, they do not require unanimous agreement before moving forward. They listen carefully, consider useful criticism, correct genuine mistakes, and then continue. Their strength does not come from believing they are always right. It comes from knowing they can survive being disliked, misunderstood, and occasionally wrong. This is an important distinction. Freedom from validation does not mean rejecting all feedback. A person who refuses to listen to anyone is not independent. He may simply be insecure in a different way. Some people call themselves confident because they dismiss every criticism. In reality, they are so afraid of discovering a weakness that they protect themselves with arrogance. Genuine confidence is flexible. It can hear an uncomfortable truth without collapsing. It can ask, "Is there something useful here?" without handing the speaker complete authority over its identity. The mature person neither worships praise nor automatically rejects criticism. He evaluates both. Praise can be dangerous when it becomes addictive. At first, it feels like encouragement. Then it becomes expectation. You perform well. People applaud. And your brain begins connecting visibility with worth. The next time you work, part of your attention is no longer on the task. It is on the response. Will this receive the same reaction? Will people still admire me? What happens if I fail publicly? Slowly, the desire to create becomes the desire to maintain an image. You stop experimenting because experiments can fail. You stop speaking honestly because honesty can reduce popularity. You stop growing because growth requires becoming a beginner again. And beginners rarely look impressive. This is why some people become trapped by their own success. Their identity becomes attached to being intelligent, powerful, talented, attractive, or respected. Every mistake threatens the image. Every competitor feels like an attack. Every moment of being ignored feels like humiliation. They may appear strong, but they are living inside a fragile structure. Anything that depends on constant confirmation must be constantly defended. The person who needs everyone to see him as intelligent cannot comfortably say, "I do not know." The person who needs everyone to see him as successful cannot admit that he is struggling. The person who needs everyone to admire him cannot rest without feeling forgotten. Real freedom begins when you become willing to be ordinary in the eyes of people who do not know your purpose. You no longer need every room to recognize you. You no longer need to announce every plan before doing the work. You no longer need your pain to be understood before you begin healing. You can be underestimated without rushing to correct the misunderstanding. You can learn quietly. You can fail privately. You can rebuild without explaining every step. This does not make you invisible. It makes you focused. Ask yourself how many goals you have weakened by talking about them too soon. You felt inspired. announced a new plan, and received immediate encouragement. For a moment, the praise created the emotional reward of achievement before the achievement existed. You felt as though progress had already been made. Then, when the real work became slow and repetitive, the excitement disappeared. You had already received attention, but had not built the discipline needed to continue. Sometimes, silence protects ambition. It keeps the energy attached to execution rather than performance. There is a quiet dignity in allowing results to arrive before explanations. You do not need to tell everyone that you are changing. Change. You do not need to announce that you are becoming disciplined. Practice discipline. You do not need to convince people that they underestimated you. Let time reveal what their judgment could not see. The desire to prove others wrong can create temporary motivation, but it is a weak foundation for a meaningful life. If your entire journey is organized around the reaction of people who doubted you, they still control the direction of your attention. Consider how often you imagine future success through the eyes of someone else. You picture the person who rejected you seeing your transformation. You imagine old friends becoming impressed. You imagine critics regretting what they said. In these fantasies, success is not primarily about freedom, contribution, mastery, or purpose. It is about creating a reaction. But even if that reaction arrives, it may not satisfy you. The person may not care. They may never see it. They may dismiss it, or they may finally approve. And you may discover that their approval does not repair what you believed it would repair. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. The recognition you are chasing may not contain the peace you expect. You may spend years building a life designed to impress someone, only to realize that the deeper wound was never about them. It was about your belief that their judgment determined your value. No achievement can permanently solve a belief that your worth must be granted from outside. Every success will require a larger success. Every round of applause will create fear of the silence that follows. The hunger will continue until you stop feeding it with performance and begin examining its source. For many people, the need for validation begins early. Perhaps affection was given only when you achieved something. Perhaps mistakes were met with humiliation rather than guidance. Perhaps you learned that being useful, quiet, attractive, successful, or agreeable was the safest way to receive attention. As a child, adapting may have protected you. You learned how to read the room, manage other people's emotions, and become the version of yourself most likely to be accepted. But a strategy that once helped you survive can later prevent you from living honestly. You may become the person who always says yes because saying no creates guilt. You may over-explain simple boundaries because you fear being seen as selfish. You may apologize when you have done nothing wrong, simply to restore harmony. You may allow disrespect because confrontation risks abandonment. From the outside, this can look like kindness. Internally, it often feels like anxiety. You are not choosing peace. You are purchasing temporary acceptance with pieces of your self-respect. The solution is not to blame your past forever. Understanding the origin of a pattern should create responsibility, not helplessness. You may not have chosen how the need for validation began, but you can choose whether it continues to govern you. Start by observing the moments when you abandon yourself for approval. Notice when your voice changes around certain people. Notice when you agree with an opinion you do not believe. Notice when you feel compelled to justify a decision that requires no defense. Notice when another person's silence immediately becomes evidence that you are unworthy. Awareness creates a pause. and the pause creates choice. Before replying, posting, explaining, or chasing, ask, what am I trying to receive right now? Am I communicating because communication is useful? Or am I asking someone to stabilize my emotions? Am I sharing because this is meaningful? Or because being unnoticed feels threatening? Am I apologizing because I caused harm? Or because disagreement makes me uncomfortable? These questions are not meant to make you suspicious of every action. They are meant to reveal the hidden transactions beneath your behavior. One of the clearest signs of validation dependence is excessive explanation. You make a decision, someone questions it, and immediately you begin presenting evidence. You provide every detail, hoping the other person will finally say, "Now I understand." And I agree. Sometimes explanation is necessary. Healthy relationships require clarity. Work requires communication. Mistakes require accountability. But there is a point where explanation stops being communication and becomes pleading. You are no longer informing. You are asking permission. Learn to recognize when the conversation is no longer productive. Some people do not misunderstand you because you explained poorly. They misunderstand you because the version they created is useful to them. Perhaps it protects their ego. Perhaps accepting your perspective would require them to admit wrongdoing. Perhaps they are committed to interpreting everything through suspicion. You can spend hours finding better words. But no explanation can open a mind that benefits from remaining closed. At that point, strength sounds simple. I have explained my position. You are free to see it differently. This sentence is difficult for validation dependent people because it leaves the other person unconvinced. It allows misunderstanding to remain, but your peace cannot depend on correcting every false interpretation. Otherwise, anyone can control your time by accusing you of something. Anyone can force you into emotional labor by refusing to believe your first answer. The ability to let another person remain wrong about you is a form of freedom. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while being criticized, betrayed, challenged, and surrounded by conflicting interests. He could not control what every citizen, senator, or general believed about him. He returned repeatedly to one responsibility: act according to reason and character. The judgment of others mattered only to the extent that it revealed useful information or affected a practical decision. It could not be allowed to govern his inner state. This principle applies even when you do not rule anything beyond your own day. Your first responsibility is not to manage every opinion. It is to ensure that your conduct remains worthy of your own respect. Self-respect is not a feeling you create through positive statements alone. It is built through alignment. When you say you value honesty, then lie to gain approval, you weaken your trust in yourself. When you say you value peace, then repeatedly return to people who create chaos, you weaken your trust in yourself. When you say you value discipline, then abandon every commitment when nobody is watching. You weaken your trust in yourself. The approval of others cannot replace the confidence lost through self-betrayal. This is why internal validation must be based on evidence. It does not mean telling yourself that everything you do is correct. It means becoming a fair and honest judge of your own behavior. At the end of the day, ask, did I act according to my values? Did I tell the truth? Did I complete what mattered? Did I treat people with dignity without abandoning my boundaries? Did I respond thoughtfully? Or did I allow insecurity to command me? These questions create a standard stronger than applause. When your standard becomes internal, praise is still pleasant. but it is no longer necessary for movement. Criticism may still hurt, but it does not automatically become truth. You can receive a compliment without building your identity on it. You can receive rejection without interpreting it as a final judgment on your future. You become less reactive because every outside response must pass through your own evaluation before it is accepted. This does not happen overnight. The need for validation has been reinforced through thousands of small moments. It weakens through thousands of different choices. You say no without writing a long defense. You wear something because you like it, not because it will impress someone. You begin a project before anyone believes in it. You allow a message to remain unanswered without creating a story about your worth. You make a mistake. Apologize clearly, and resist the urge to punish yourself publicly so others will reassure you. You also learn to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing people. This is essential because any honest life will disappoint someone. When you set a boundary, a person who benefited from your lack of boundaries may call you selfish. When you become disciplined, friends who preferred your old habits may call you distant. When you stop explaining yourself, people accustomed to unlimited access may call you arrogant. Their discomfort does not automatically mean your decision is wrong. Sometimes it simply means the relationship is being required to adjust. However, do not use this idea to justify cruelty. Independence is not permission to become careless. A strong person can consider the feelings of others without being ruled by them. He can communicate respectfully, listen sincerely, and change direction when the evidence shows that he is wrong. The goal is not to stop caring about people. The goal is to stop abandoning your principles in order to prevent every negative reaction. There is a major difference between kindness and people-pleasing. Kindness is chosen freely. People-pleasing is driven by fear. Kindness can say no. People-pleasing says yes, then becomes resentful. Kindness respects both people. People-pleasing sacrifices one person to satisfy another, and the person being sacrificed is usually you. Kindness helps when help is appropriate. People-pleasing tries to earn security by becoming indispensable. Some people become exhausted because they have built their identity around being needed. They solve everyone's problems, respond immediately, and carry responsibilities that do not belong to them. Being needed creates a sense of value, but it also creates dependence. If others become capable, you may feel unnecessary. If they fail to appreciate your sacrifice, anger appears. This is not sustainable. Your worth cannot depend on remaining useful to people who may never learn to stand on their own. Give from strength, not from fear. Help because the action aligns with your values, not because you are terrified that refusal will make someone leave. Before accepting another responsibility, ask whether you genuinely have the capacity. Ask whether your help supports growth or enables irresponsibility. Ask whether you would still choose the action if nobody thanked you. The answer may reveal whether you are serving from character or bargaining for approval. Social media has intensified the validation problem because it turns attention into visible numbers. Views, likes, comments, shares, and followers can become measurements of identity. A person can create something meaningful, receive little response, and conclude that the work had no value. Another person can receive enormous attention for something empty and interpret visibility as proof of importance. The numbers are real, and they may provide useful information, but they are incomplete. Attention measures attention. It does not always measure truth, quality, character, or long-term impact. Learn to use feedback without allowing feedback to use you. Study what performs well. Understand your audience. Improve your work. But do not allow every number to become a statement about your worth. A video can fail while you remain capable. A project can be ignored while containing valuable lessons. A strong idea can arrive at the wrong time. Results matter, but results must be interpreted with patience and context. When you depend on public response, you begin making creative decisions from fear. You copy what already works. You avoid original ideas because originality may be misunderstood. You become obsessed with immediate performance and neglect the deeper work of building skill. But the people who create lasting value are often willing to be unseen while they develop. They accept that the early stage may look unimpressive. They know that mastery is built long before recognition arrives. The same principle applies to personal growth. Much of your progress will not be visible to others. Nobody applauds when you stop replaying an old insult. Nobody sees the moment you choose not to send an angry message. Nobody celebrates when you sit with loneliness. Nobody may notice that you are becoming more patient, more disciplined, or more honest. Yet these invisible decisions are constructing the person you will become. You must learn to recognize your own progress, not through fantasy, but through honest observation. Perhaps you recover from rejection more quickly than before. Perhaps you can receive criticism without losing the entire day. Perhaps you no longer explain every boundary. Perhaps you have stopped checking whether someone who left is still watching you. These changes may appear small, but they represent a transfer of authority. Your emotional state is slowly returning to your own hands. Another step is to stop comparing your private reality with another person's public image. Comparison creates a constant demand for validation because someone will always appear ahead. There will always be someone more successful, admired, attractive, wealthy, experienced, or visible. If your value depends on winning every comparison, peace becomes mathematically impossible. Even when you surpass one person, your mind will find another. Comparison is useful only when it provides information. You can study another person's process, learn from their strengths, and become inspired by what is possible. But comparison becomes destructive when you use someone else's position as evidence against yourself. You do not know the full cost of their life, the timing of their opportunities, the support they received, or the difficulties they conceal. More importantly, their path is not the standard by which your character should be judged. Return to your own responsibilities. What can you improve today? What skill remains weak? What promise have you avoided? What decision would move you closer to the person you want to become? These questions produce action. Comparison without action produces resentment. You stare at another person's results while neglecting your own process, then feel even further behind. People who do not need constant validation are not free from insecurity. They have simply stopped treating insecurity as an emergency. A doubtful thought appears, but they do not immediately seek reassurance. They allow uncertainty to exist. They ask what the evidence shows. They continue acting before confidence feels complete. This is important because reassurance provides temporary relief, but can strengthen dependence. Every time you ask someone else to erase a doubt that you could learn to tolerate, The mind concludes that the doubt was dangerous. Practice remaining with small amounts of uncertainty. Make a reasonable decision without asking 5 people to confirm it. Share an idea without checking the response every few minutes. Let a conversation end without analyzing every sentence. Wear something you like without imagining the judgment of the room. These exercises may seem minor, but they teach your nervous system that disapproval, ambiguity, and silence can be survived. Silence from others is not always rejection. A delayed reply is not proof of disrespect. A neutral face is not evidence of dislike. An unsuccessful attempt is not a declaration that you are incapable. The validation-seeking mind turns incomplete information into personal judgment. It fills every blank space with the most painful explanation. Then it reacts to the explanation as though it were fact. Separate what happened from the story you created. The fact is that someone did not respond. The story is that you are unimportant. The fact is that your idea was criticized. The story is that you have no talent. The fact is that a person chose someone else. The story is that nobody will ever choose you. When you see the difference, you recover room to think. Your mind may still generate the story. You do not have to fight every thought. Simply stop granting each thought the authority of truth. Sigh. That is one interpretation, not a fact. Then return to what belongs to you, your actions, your standards, your next step. This is the Stoic discipline of judgment. Events enter the mind, but meaning is not complete until you assign it. A person's rejection may hurt, but rejection does not determine your objective value. It tells you that one person, group, or institution did not choose you under a particular set of circumstances. Sometimes their decision is useful feedback. Sometimes it reflects incompatibility. Sometimes it reflects factors you cannot know. Treat rejection as information, not identity. Do not turn rejection into a mission to prove the other person wrong. That keeps your future chained to their judgment. Improve because improvement matters. Build because your potential deserves development. Walk away because dignity matters more than forced acceptance. The most powerful response to rejection is not revenge. It is refusing to reject yourself. This also means accepting that not everyone will recognize your value. A valuable book can remain unread by someone who dislikes reading. A meaningful conversation can be wasted on someone committed to misunderstanding. A loyal person can be taken for granted by someone who values excitement more than stability. Your value and another person's ability to recognize it are not the same thing, but be careful. The phrase, "they failed to recognize my value," can become another defense against growth. Sometimes you were overlooked unfairly. Sometimes you were not ready. Sometimes your communication was weak. Your skill was incomplete. Or your behavior created a reasonable concern. Freedom from validation means you can examine this possibility without humiliation. You do not need to choose between hating yourself and blaming everyone else. You can say, "My worth remains intact, and I still have work to do." This balanced view creates real confidence. You are neither perfect nor worthless. You are a developing human being with strengths, limitations, responsibilities, and potential. Because your identity is not destroyed by imperfection, you can face reality more directly. You can admit when envy influenced you. You can notice when you were seeking attention. You can apologize without begging for reassurance. You can begin again without creating a dramatic story about failure. The deepest form of validation comes from becoming someone whose word you trust. When you repeatedly act against your own values, no amount of praise feels secure. Somewhere inside, you know the image and the reality are different. But when your behavior becomes consistent, you need less outside confirmation. You know how you worked. You know what you sacrificed. You know which temptations you refused. You know what you did when nobody was watching. That knowledge produces a quiet confidence that cannot be faked. It is not loud because it does not need to persuade. It does not enter every room demanding recognition. It does not attack others to feel superior. It carries the calm of evidence. You have proven to yourself that you can endure discomfort, keep commitments, and recover from mistakes. No comment can create that confidence, and no comment can completely remove it. Begin building this confidence through small promises. Do not make dramatic commitments that collapse after 3 days. Choose actions you can repeat. Wake at a reasonable time. Finish one important task before seeking distraction. Move your body. Keep your space in order. Spend time learning a valuable skill. Speak truthfully. Leave conversations that demand dishonesty. Every completed promise becomes a piece of internal evidence. Then, reduce the behaviors that turn your attention outward. Stop checking who viewed your work every few minutes. Stop searching for signs that a person misses you. Stop asking people to confirm decisions you have already made. Stop explaining boundaries to those who repeatedly ignore them. Create small periods in which no external response is available. And notice what your mind does. At first, the silence may feel uncomfortable. Without immediate feedback, you may question whether your effort matters. Stay with that discomfort. This is where a new foundation is being built. Continue the work because it aligns with your values, not because applause is guaranteed. The ability to act without an audience is one of the clearest signs that your life is becoming internally directed. Spend time alone. But do not use solitude as a performance of superiority. Some people react to rejection by declaring that they need nobody. This is not freedom. It is pain wearing armor. Human connection remains important. The goal is not to become emotionally unreachable. The goal is to enter relationships from wholeness rather than desperation. You can value connection without accepting disrespect. You can ask for support without making another person responsible for your identity. Healthy relationships do not require you to prove your worth constantly. They allow disagreement without threatening the entire bond. They respect boundaries. They offer recognition, but do not demand performance. When you become less validation dependent, you may discover that certain relationships were held together by your fear. You apologized first every time. You carried every conversation. You ignored your needs. You accepted inconsistency because asking for more risked losing the person. As you change, some people will adapt. Others may become uncomfortable. They may say you have changed. And they may be correct. You have changed. You are no longer offering unlimited access in exchange for uncertain approval. You are no longer volunteering to be misunderstood in silence while protecting everyone else from discomfort. Change does not mean becoming hostile. It means becoming honest. You may lose relationships during this process. That loss can hurt. Freedom does not remove grief. But not every relationship is meant to survive the end of your self-abandonment. Some connections were built around a role you can no longer perform. The fixer, the pleaser, the person who never says no, the person who tolerates everything. When you leave that role, the relationship must either become more honest or come to an end. Do not celebrate loss unnecessarily. And do not romanticize isolation. Grieve what mattered. Learn what the relationship revealed. But do not return to an unhealthy role simply because emptiness feels unfamiliar. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. Give yourself time to develop relationships in which respect does not have to be purchased. The mindset of people who never need constant validation is ultimately built on one truth. Your responsibility is to live in a way you can respect, not to create an image everyone will approve. You will be misunderstood. You will make mistakes. You will disappoint people. Some will underestimate you. Some will recognize your value only after access has ended. Others may never recognize it at all. None of this removes your responsibility to act well. In fact, it increases it. When applause is no longer the guide, character must become the guide. Ask what is honest. Ask what is courageous. Ask what is useful. Ask what belongs to your control. Then act. Even when nobody celebrates the decision, you do not need to become indifferent to every opinion. Listen to people who have earned the right to advise you. Pay attention to those who demonstrate wisdom, integrity, and genuine concern. Consider criticism from people who understand the work, but do not give equal weight to every voice. A stranger's careless comment should not carry the same authority as the honest observation of someone who knows your character. Choose your counsel carefully. Then remember that even wise people cannot make every decision for you. At some point, you must accept responsibility for choosing. There may be no perfect answer. There may be disagreement. Move with humility and courage. A mature person can make a decision, accept the consequences, and adjust when necessary without demanding that everyone approve. First, one day, you may notice that you no longer feel the urge to explain certain things, not because you have become cold, but because clarity has replaced desperation. You know why you left. You know why you began. You know why a boundary was necessary. You know what you are building. You remain open to honest conversation. But you are no longer begging to be interpreted correctly. You may also notice that praise feels different. You can receive it with gratitude, then return to the work. It no longer creates an inflated identity that must be protected. Criticism also feels different. It may sting, but it becomes a question rather than a verdict. Is it true? Is part of it true? Is there something to improve? If not, can I let it pass? This is emotional maturity, neither worshipping the voice nor automatically fighting it. The strongest people are not strong because nobody questions them. They are strong because questioning does not immediately separate them from themselves. They can stand inside uncertainty. They can tolerate being unseen. They can continue without applause. Their peace is supported by principles, their confidence by evidence, and their identity by choices repeated over time. So stop performing for people who are not responsible for your future. Stop explaining your worth to those committed to reducing it. Stop measuring your life by how quickly others notice your progress. Let people misunderstand what they have not taken the time to know. Let them underestimate what you are still building. Let them hold opinions that your behavior will eventually make irrelevant. Your task is simpler, but not easier. Become someone you can trust. Keep your word. Tell the truth. Correct your mistakes. Build useful skills. Protect your attention. Choose relationships that respect honesty. Continue when the response is quiet. Rest when necessary. Then return. Allow your life to become a statement that does not require constant explanation. You will still enjoy appreciation. You will still feel pain when someone important misunderstands you. You will still have moments when rejection awakens an old wound. Do not condemn yourself for being human. Freedom from validation is not the elimination of every emotional need. It is the refusal to let those needs govern your character. When the urge to prove yourself returns, pause. Ask what action would still matter if nobody were watching. Ask what choice you would make if no applause were available. Ask whether you are trying to build a meaningful life or merely a convincing image. Then choose the action that allows you to respect yourself tomorrow. The world may approve. It may remain silent. It may criticize what it later imitates. None of these outcomes can be completely controlled. What can be controlled is the quality of your effort, the honesty of your conduct, and the direction of your attention. Keep those things in your own hands. Eventually, you will understand that being validated by everyone was never the goal. The goal was to become so aligned with your values that approval became a gift rather than a necessity. To become so grounded that rejection could hurt without defining you. To become so honest that misunderstanding could exist without forcing you into endless defense. That is the mindset of people who never need constant validation. They do not believe they are above others. They simply refuse to place their identity inside another person's unstable opinion. They listen, learn, and remain accountable. But they do not beg. They do not perform every moment. They do not chase those who have already decided not to see them. Their strength is quiet. Their confidence is built in private. Their peace is protected by boundaries. Their direction comes from principles, and because they no longer waste their lives trying to be understood by everyone, they finally have the energy to understand themselves. So, let today be the day you begin taking your authority back. Do not demand a complete transformation overnight. Begin with one honest decision, one boundary without unnecessary apology, 1 hour of work without checking for attention, 1 moment of silence instead of defensive explanation, 1 promise kept when nobody is present to praise you. These choices will seem small, but they are not small. Each one teaches your mind that you can survive without immediate approval. Each one weakens the old dependence. Each one builds the inner structure of a person who can stand calmly in a world of changing opinions. You are not here to convince everyone that you are worthy. You are here to live in a way that makes worth visible through character. You are not here to control how every person remembers you. You are here to control what you repeatedly choose. You are not here to win every argument. You are here to avoid losing yourself inside one. Let others speak. Let them doubt. Let them misunderstand. Listen when wisdom is present. Correct yourself when truth demands it. And continue when noise has nothing useful to offer. Your life does not need universal agreement. It needs direction. The strongest people never waste energy trying to be understood by everyone, because they know that energy has a higher purpose. It can be used to build discipline, to develop wisdom, to create meaningful work, to protect the people they love, to correct their own weaknesses, to become calmer, stronger, and more reliable. Use your energy there. Build quietly. Live honestly. Let your standards speak before your explanations. Let your consistency answer questions that words cannot resolve. Let time reveal what impatience wants to prove immediately. And when no one applauds, continue. When someone questions you, examine the truth. Then continue. When rejection arrives, Learn, recover, and continue. When praise arrives, accept it with gratitude. Then continue, because your path was never supposed to depend on the changing reactions of the crowd. The moment you stop asking everyone else to confirm who you are, you begin discovering who you could become.